you're on screen here, so you're live.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, good. All right, great. So it does, as long as you keep the same settings from the previous event, it grabs the key again.
Okay.
But it's just that last week, yeah. So because Tim Stallmer and I reestablished the key yesterday, we haven't done it again. But with last week doing, what we ever did, 10 or 15 different streams, the key got broken. Okay, perfect. So as long as that's a good lesson. As long as we're sort of doing a recurring meeting like this and we don't do anything in between, it should kick itself off automatically. Because the problem with the recurring meetings is if I have to change, yesterday I had to boot everybody out of the room just about now, reset the key in the Zoom back end, and then reopen the room because it's a recurring meeting. So I can't put it in this meeting. So anyway, there's pros and cons on both sides of doing this stuff. But if we're going to do this on a bigger scale for the conference this winter, it'll be interesting. So the other piece, and don't start recording yet. Or live, but not for public consumption, Rebecca and Aaron, but since I have Mike here in the room. So we are going virtual for December. Craig's coming up with a schedule, and Rod, I think we've got a schedule that the board's going to be pretty happy with. Actually, we'll be offering some complimentary access as well as some paid access. Anyway, go ahead and take the annual conference registration off the homepage. And I think Craig said only like 3 people had registered. So if you don't mind, send me their names and email addresses, and I'll contact them and just say, we're retooling. But thank you for your enthusiastic support of our conference. So nobody paid or anything. So,
right.
And then we got to figure out the price, and we're working on dates and stuff too. So we're going to try to do some of it at least on the weekends in the hopes that people can attend. And not have to take off school, because I don't think subs. So like Aaron and Rebecca, if you take a virtual day off, do they get you a virtual sub? Rosie the Riveter or Rosie the Maid? No, your kids just sort of have the day off.
The vast pool of online teaching substitutes that you probably have to select from.
Yeah, well, that's what I wondered. That'd be sort of a lot to ask. We had a substitute in Middlesex County who came from the Crab Shack in the mornings. I mean, it was like somebody's mom, who just came to hang out for the day. She was nice and everything. But anyway, okay, good. So I will follow up probably with an email, Mike, but for now, just take it down, and then we'll figure out what the price is and the description and all that good stuff. So cool. Other than that, I think we're ready. Right? Are we ready?
Yeah, I think so. So, but Rebecca, so you had, Aaron, you had set up the slide deck. Rebecca, are you part of the? Okay, okay. I was just wondering because I was going to change. No. Change the introductions, but if you're not actually part of it. So, and then you'll role reverse tomorrow, right? You'll be the lead, and Aaron will be there for moral support.
Right. Well, that way, if there's something I want to show from my course, I'll jump in. But Aaron's got it today. We're just tag teaming like this. We each are taking the lead one day.
Okay. Yeah, great. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I had it right before I started down into introductions and everything. So.
When I am sharing my screen like this, you can obviously see the slides. Can you see the thumbnail of you in the corner?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Which is a duplicate because as you share your screen and we broadcast, you'll be on the side, so you would be in both places. So I don't really think you need that on the screen.
It doesn't show up when you present your slide. Then it's just you on the side, I'm pretty sure. It's because
if you go to present,
you're sharing your whole desktop.
Yeah, she's asked it to.
An application. Yeah, if you really want to share just the slides, I think. But then you have
so
videos,
if you stop sharing, Aaron, and so go to stop sharing, and then as you start that again, you choose just the presentation, not your your whole desktop, I think is what we're aiming at. Yes.
Yeah.
But then if you
And
want
that-
to
and
go
that-
to Canvas, are you going to go to Canvas pages, Erin, like directly in your courses?
I could and might do that. I try to set up a lot to where I could just keep it within the slides, but if someone has a question, I would maybe switch back over.
It's just fine.
Well,
I-
now you
I-
have just
my
blank. Now you have just blank boxes where you have those other Zoom features up. It's hovering over top, but it's not showing the content within them. So you're gonna have to do one of two things. You have to share your whole. I would suggest taking those off while you're presenting.
Taking what off?
Just because you have what you have up there now is the box with the thumbnail, and that's just showing up as a gray box. It's not showing the thumbnail. Yeah, where you're at, where your mouse is now.
Huh.
So if you had it set up the way you wanted it, then just go back and share it in that way. Because if you're going to toggle back and forth between, it's just trying to make that center piece of that presentation as large as possible. So there you go. Yeah. So you won't need to bring up the video panel because it'll be a duplicate of what's already on the screen. So you could drop that that panel, and then we'll let everybody in and we'll get started. So yeah, if you just minimize that, the small thumbnail.
All right, I'm gonna let everybody in.
Or hide video panel, either way. Yeah.
Good.
Or you can use more and hide it, either or.
Welcome,
There we go.
everyone. Sorry about the minor delay here. We're playing with technology and got distracted, I think. Welcome aboard. This is Karen Richardson, the Executive Director of the Virginia Society for Technology and Education. We're thrilled to have you come together, which I realize today is our penultimate lunch and learn. Tomorrow will be our last one as part of this series. I personally have learned a lot, and I hope you have as well. So we'll give folks a couple more minutes here to get into the room as we're admitting folks. All of these are being shown both here in Zoom where you can participate. We are streaming them via YouTube as well, and the recordings will be in YouTube. So if you wish to share them with colleagues who are not part of the courses, probably the YouTube videos are the best place to go. And I will put the list of the, I'll put the playlist URL in the chat. We also do work with Canvas. Thank you, Rod Carno, very much. And then there is, if you click on the playlist tab in YouTube, there's actually a list of all the lunch and learns, including the ones that Canvas does as well on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. So lots and lots of good learning and support and ideas in there. I don't see anybody else in the waiting room. I'll keep an eye on it, Rod, but I am going to turn it over to Rod Carno. Rod is the you're not the executive director of VISTE. That's my job. Rod is the chairperson of the board of directors of VISTE. He is also the project manager for our virtual Virginia expansion project. We're thrilled to have him. So Rod, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Karen, for that introduction, and welcome everyone to our Lunch and Learn for July 29, 2020. Erin Hill is joining us today. You can see Erin's picture there as well as mine. Erin Hill is a humanities teacher integrating English and social studies at Code RVA Regional High School in Richmond. She teaches global studies and American studies there, and she has been using Canvas for the past 2 years. In tandem with project-based learning, Erin enthusiastically shares agile practices like Scrum and Kanban with her teams of students and colleagues. She welcomes you to join her community of practice on Twitter, where you can find a multitude of free online learning resources. You can also find her on Twitter at Education Erin. So as you can see on the screen there. So Erin, if you'll move to that next slide, we will we'll get going here. So module workflow and Google integrations is the theme or topic for today. So why was that your chosen theme? What are you excited about sharing with us today?
As an experienced Canvas user, I'm by no means an expert, but just a teacher and user of Canvas. I felt like these two things are key to developing instruction on Canvas and doing it in a way that makes sense and is hopefully as stress-free as possible.
Hopefully as stress-free as possible. Well, you've picked two really good ones because there's a high interest in modules and learning how to effectively use those. And there's also a lot of interest around the integrations. So if you can move to the next slide, we'll break down where you're going with that today.
Yeah. So again, we're going to take a look at sort of two key things: establishing workflow and modules. And I'm going to ground us in principles of Kanban, which is an agile practice I'll explain in a moment. And then we'll also sort of ground our framework in that in the concept of chunking, so that your chunking instructions and students aren't overloaded by the way that you present the material. Instead, they're able to focus on doing the material instead of how to access it. So we'll look at how to develop modules effectively through those two things. And then after that, we'll do a pretty deep dive into how to use Google Apps, specifically Docs, slides within Canvas. I will be quite upfront with you for the second half with the integrating Google Suite assignments. If your school doesn't use Google Apps, if your students don't have access to Google Slides, Google Docs, that might not be applicable for you. So you might decide to drop off then. Most schools, I think, are using Google or have access to it, but we'll take a pretty deep dive into what that looks like and various ways you can have students do work and various ways for students to collaborate on Google Suite within assignments, within modules, if that makes sense.
Yes, and there are a lot of parallels with even with school divisions that are using Microsoft on, not necessarily the exact same, path, but the utilization of, the storage that's there for the drive files, as well as some of the other tools. So they might find it informational, if not directly applicable. So, okay, well, so let's get started. I'm excited to see what you have to share with us today.
Sure. So we'll start with Kanban. So Kanban falls under what we call agile approaches to working. And agile, and specifically Kanban and Scrum, originally sort of came out of software development. And nowadays it's used in many, many companies. So as we're preparing students for the work world, we want them to be able to work like they work in the workspace. And again, it's over 200 companies are using some form of agile at this point. And so think of agile as this big umbrella of methodologies and approaches to organizing your workflow. Within that, there's something called Kanban. And I'm going to share with you what it is, why I think you should use it, and how it applies in this context. So Kanban is simply Japanese for visual signal or card. And you've probably seen people using boards that look like this, the to-do, doing, done. And it's likely that you are a list person. I find a lot of teachers like to make lists and check them off, and it keeps us organized. And so Kanban really takes those lists and makes it more visual, so that you can see yourself processing the work. Or if you're on a team and you're tackling a complex project, it's a great way to sort of get a good sense of scope and how much work your team can handle and how you're going to do the work. But at its heart, it's just visualizing your work in some way. And we use Kanban because we're visual. Humans are visual learners. The brain processes visuals faster, 60,000 times faster than text. And so think about when you're driving, there's a reason we have stoplights and not a thing that says stop, slow down, and go, right? It's color coded. It's just a quick visual. And it's because it's easier to process for us. You can go further into sort of the anatomy of the brain and how it's connected to the eye and how we're processing that visual information faster than anything else. And it also comprises a good chunk of data that comes to our brain. So it is the first thing we process, and we process it the fastest. So when we look at designing instruction, here you have a syllabus on the left and a Kanban board on the right. And there's this sense of ease and comfort with looking at the thing on the right. Now, I know the thing on the right is not an equal because it doesn't list all of those assignments. But in theory, we could, in that to-do list everything that's on that English syllabus and transfer it to that Kanban board. But again, this also goes back to, and we could do a whole topic just on a whole session or a whole course just on Kanban. But the idea is, as you're planning modules, how can you take all those detailed text and syllabi and transfer that into a visualized workflow? And so modules really does that for us. And again, Kanban, it does a lot of things. It facilitates prioritization. You can use it to promote continuous improvement. You can actually use Kanban boards as a source of reflection, a place where you put your reflection as you're doing the work. There are lots of methods for that. But for today, we're going to focus on how Kanban makes learning visible, which again, study after study shows that making the learning visible, making the learning objectives clear, chunking the information in easy to process forms, it's effective for students and just for humans. It's not just for young people, but it's especially helpful for students who are developing their self-regulation skills and their self-organization skills. And Kanban also helps us, again, visualize that flow so that students know what to do. And also as a teacher, it helps me, we have all these things as a teacher to plan and to do and to deliver. It helps me narrow that focus so I can really focus on doing a few things well and then moving on to the next. So within Kanban, there are 2 rules, and that's it. It's very simple. One is visualize your work, and one is limit your work in progress. This is sometimes colloquially called WIP, limit your WIP. And this all comes out of a book called Personal Kanban, and this approach was developed originally by Jim Benson and Tony and Dave Maria Berry. And even without, I'm promoting their book, but even without getting the book, you can explore their blog there, personalkanban.com. There are plenty of videos on this. Jim Benson's videos are great. But at the end of the day, it's those 2 things. Visualize your work, limit your work in progress. So as we are developing modules, how do we visualize that work for students? And how do we make sure that each module is appropriately chunked so that they can actually achieve it? So keeping that in mind, keeping your work visual, staying focused on fewer things at a time, you're going to decide that, you're going to have modules, but how will you organize the modules? So there's 2 options for organizational structure for modules. One is weekly workflow, and that's what I've used, and maybe what I will continue using. And I will kind of show you what that looks like in a moment. But weekly workflow, week 1, week 2, week 3, and so forth. You could do daily workflow. For instance, I had a summer course in which it was only 2 weeks, so daily workflow made sense. Each module was a day. And some people do unit or topic-driven modules. So you have your unit on colonization, your unit on revolution, your unit on constitution, and it flows that way. I know that for math folks, they tend to like the unit-driven because the content is more linear in a way. And sometimes even history folks like that too, because again, you've got that linear chronological flow of history, or you could do it if you're teaching history thematically. Science, again, you could have those units modules. It really just depends on what you want, but both ways, both the weekly workflow and the topic-driven modules, they both lack a component. They both lack the other thing. So you have to think about how will you compensate for what your structure lacks. So if you're doing a weekly workflow, how are you going to make sure that students know what the roadmap is, what the content will look like as it's coming up? You still want to organize the content by units or share with them a calendar. You know, we'll be in this unit for so many weeks and this unit for so many weeks. If you're so the calendar overview is more appropriate if you are doing a unit or topic driven module. If you're doing a weekly workflow, you sort of already have the timeline laid out. You still have to provide an overview of topics. What topic are you going to cover when? But you sort of decide what makes sense for you. I do recommend visually laying this out for students. So again, I chose a weekly workflow for the past couple of years, and I trained students from the very beginning and also continuously reminded them and their parents what our workflow was. So for us, we had work come out on Monday. So on the weekly module on Canvas would debut ideally in its entirety. Admittedly, when you are first starting to do online learning, it's a lot, especially if you're creating your own content from scratch. So I found occasionally things would come out on Tuesday or Wednesday. But as you can see in the notes there, I did tell students that I would never assign more than I thought you could handle. Not to compare myself to a godlike figure. They say that God only gets what we can handle. But I made sure that they were clear that I was very thoughtfully and deliberately considering how much work I was giving them, but keeping that workflow in mind. So work comes out on Monday. They have all week to work on it. Begin to consider too, how much time will your work take? How much time will your classes take? And plan that out. So that again, you're giving students a reasonable amount of work in progress. Think about maybe one assignment a day, or oftentimes, since I do more project-based learning, it's one assignment with parts for a week. And again, that work would be due on Monday. New work comes out, they have all week to work on it, and then the work's due on Monday. So every Monday, we've got new work and the old work comes due. And again, this takes some training, but I think that it was helpful for everyone involved for there to be a routine workflow. Again, students didn't have to think about when stuff's due and where to find the work or when it's coming out. They're thinking about how to do the work. They're thinking about what the work is. So they're actually focused on the content, and they're not focused on figuring out what's going on, pacing wise. And to see what this looks like in Canvas, so this is a couple snapshots of what my page looked like this year. I started out with the courses Global Studies 2, GS2, week 1. And this year I started naming my weekly modules according to the theme. So week 1 is Introductions and Communications. Week 2, we toured the tools we were using. There were assignments that went with that. And then week 3, Communication and Code Switching. And those, obviously, if you click on them in the site, they bump out to the full module. But with week 1, you can kind of see this is short, this is to the point, what they were doing for that week. And they knew, okay, I can plan my week based off of this for this course. I also had 2 additional modules that were sort of catch-alls for any time. If a student was done early, they could look at the writing contest. And of course, I want my students reading every day. So if you clicked on that module, there are different places to access text, like our school digital library and things like that. So that's what a weekly workflow looks like. Something that I learned this year as a result of user feedback or student feedback was that sort of how you organize your modules. So what I established is weekly, but when you make modules in Canvas, the new module will automatically populate at the bottom. So this is what it looked like during my first year using Canvas. Week 1, week 2, week 3. But by the time we got to week 20, and I asked students to go to the module for that week, they had to scroll all the way down to week 20. And it was very cumbersome. So students were like, why don't you just put the modules that we're working on at the top? Now, admittedly, this is an extra step on my behalf, but it ends up being much better for the student. So this year, as you see, the modules go upwards instead of students having to scroll downwards. So the week that we're on, is right there at the top. Anytime you can make things easier for students, again, they're going to have a much better time focusing on the work and less time scrolling through your page. So consider that, that sort of course design, and consider the user feedback. I think this is also a nice display of the growth that I had from year 1 to year 2. I have my modules here. You can see even there were some things that I didn't delete, but they were not published in that week 1, but they're sort of hanging out there still. I was very much sort of experimenting. At the time, we tried labeling each assignment according to its category, whether it was written, practice, or essay. We tried adding the amount of time it would take to complete the assignment there. We tried lots of different things. You experiment with your own. I found that explanatory is better. Whatever you put there, just have it very clearly say what the assignment is. I also like to include emojis to sort of have a shortcut, or it adds some flavor and fun to your course. But that's sort of next level stuff. If you're just now starting with Canvas this year, sort of the easiest thing that you can do, and what we did, and it's not exactly the most beautiful thing, but just have modules as your homepage, and kids just find the work there on modules, and it looks just like that. This was functional. So I know there are a lot of teachers out there right now working on their home pages and working on cute buttons and their Bitmoji classrooms, and that's all wonderful. But I would save that as sort of your dessert and your cherry on top, and really focus on trying to hone your modules and chunk your content. Go back and decide again, do you want to do a weekly workflow, or you want to do unit driven? And as you do that, what would be the titles of your modules? You can even plan this without your Canvas sandbox. You can just plan this on paper. What are my modules going to be? What's going to go in them? How am I able to focus the work in progress for each module? So obviously that requires some honing of your units. And you'll find that sometimes online learning isn't, you may not be able to go as wide and cover as much as you would in person. But honestly, it's probably for the best that we're focusing things for kids. And so my last point on modules and creating them is make sure that you communicate them to everyone involved. So at the beginning of the school year, our school, all teachers on their homepage created a video on how to navigate their Canvas homepage, how to access modules. I mentioned the workflow. So make sure you're communicating that via video. I also presented, this is a snapshot of a slideshow that I presented as a roadmap of what our course looks like, how to navigate Canvas, how our course works, how blended learning works, how online learning works, specifically what things look like in Canvas. This was also sent out through a humanities newsletter. I went over it with students in class, had them say it back to me, make sure that we're all on the same page. It's very easy in the online learning environment to lose sight of what's going on, or there's this unevenness of knowledge. So make sure that you communicate the workflow to everyone involved, and it'll just make everything easier for everyone involved. So again, provide that overview of your course sequencing, share how you organize your modules, and make sure that everyone sort of knows how to navigate it. Oh, and there's—
So there is a, I'm sorry, Erin, there was a question that came up, and I wanted to kind of cycle back to some of the points that you made.
Yeah.
The question in there is about sharing one of the videos that you created on for families and students about how to navigate the course. That would be beneficial, and you are going to share a link to this presentation at the end, so perhaps we can work that in as well to get the video example. But just kind of going back through that visual of that workflow, and I think you really emphasized, saturating the communication effort on students so that they understand exactly, where to navigate through the course and how to find things within the course. The tip for most recent at the top, that's one of the things that just, deciding on that workflow and what that's going to look like for students. And I do like that you talked about your growth and the way that you set up the course and mentioned student feedback. Was there a particular way that you garnered the feedback from the students, or was that pretty informal, or how did you gather that feedback so that you could respond to what students were liking or thought they needed improvement in the course?
While I do pride myself on asking for feedback regularly, that particular feedback just came informally. I mean, students just verbally out loud, sighing, oh, we have to go all the way through this page. Why can't you just put the stuff at the top?
Right. Well, yeah. So it makes sense. So, but that's, with that user, kind of focusing on that users and asking for that feedback, and then, figuring out how to respond from that. And I guess that's, as you're saying, build that and put it together and try to get, that workflow in mind. And then there is always that cycle of iteration on, how to improve the course, how to add features to it to enhance it visually as well as functionally. So, and that's something that you kind of gain through experience. But I appreciate you sharing your experience and how you switched from year 1 to year 2 and just that workflow kind of thing. A couple other things, some compliments there. There's this beautiful visual focused chunk to consider the student work in progress, those kinds of things. And then I hear you communicating with students and how to navigate. Do you have advice for parents? Do we have access to documents or videos for parents? We'll share some of those out through when we share out the link, and then the link at the end for this presentation. We'll make sure that we make some of that available to participants.
Yeah, and we definitely also, as a school, our administration, our leadership shared out all of our videos on one HyperDoc page so that students could look at how each department did their Canvas pages, how each teacher did it. I would also recommend, if you're able to plan it, it would make sense in the future to maybe just have at least each department, but maybe school-wide, settle on how you want to do this. We have each department doing their own thing. I do like that because it obviously what works for humanities may not work for the same way in math, but at least have consistency within your department. And then hopefully if you have consistency within your department, you can share out those videos as a whole, or even save time and only one teacher needs to do it, But I can certainly share the video that I've shared with parents later. Yeah.
Right. So creating that video, was that just a screen capture tool and just giving a kind of a course tour with, just kind of narrating as you toured through the course? Is that what that kind of looked like?
Precisely. Yeah. I just used Screencastify and went to my homepage and pulled my mouse around and toured the course, and I explained the workflow on the homepage, and I had that picture of the workflow, this picture.
Right.
And then I actually clicked on modules and I previewed what work was coming up. Right.
So simple screen capture, some directions, just kind of navigating through and narrating that for students and for parents. I guess it would probably, once you've kind of described that, it would work for either group, but that's a good quick way of showing folks things. I know you have a lot more to cover, so we'll get back to your presentation, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I like it. It makes it feel more conversational, which is nice. And here we go again. So this is actually, while it's not a to-do, doing, done traditional Kanban board, Kanban is flexible, right? So we're visualizing our work right now. We just did establishing workflow and modules. We did the role of Kanban. We did the methods of chunking modules, and we're moving right along. And I often do this too, not often, I always do this when I share content, especially these presentations, stand and deliver type content online with students. So that way, as they're watching the video, maybe they have to watch the recording because they couldn't make it or they're absent, they can just sort of look at the preview of the recording and see, oh, I really need role of Kanban. I can skip this. So showing your learning targets and checking it off as you go during your virtual sessions, I think is really helpful for me as well. Keeps me on task because I have a tendency sometimes to meander with rabbit holes and fun questions that students ask. So next up, we have integrating Google Suite assignments. And again, in order to do any of this, you have to make sure that your school has access to Google Apps and that it's enabled on Canvas, or that your Canvas administrator has opened that up for you. and you should be able to do everything, at least as far as my experimentation has gone, except the Assignments LTI. That has to be added by a Canvas administrator. But everything else you should be able to do that I'm about to share with you. So not to garner your pity, but as I was looking for resources on this, I was drowning. There are so many resources on how to do assignments and what that looks like. Canvas guides are great in that they are detailed. They are massive though, and kind of overwhelming. But that is where I got a lot of these resources, and I'll link them throughout. I've also received a lot of help from the Twitter community, the education community on Twitter. And also on Facebook, there is a new group called Canvas for Secondary Educators. And it's really neat because if you're having a problem in the moment, you can just do a quick post on there and chances are someone will respond and they've dealt with the same problem. It's a little less sort of official feeling. I know Canvas has Canvas Commons and people can ask questions there, but the social networks are a little more relaxed. So people feel just sort of at ease to ask these questions and sometimes ask repetitive questions. And it works really well in those social networks. I do have to admit here, you see all those tabs. I actually had the second layer of tabs there. That's how many tabs I had open in trying to find answers and compile these resources. So in a way, I was not limiting my WIP, although I was only working on Google Suite assignments. Do as I say, not as I do on having all these tabs open. Limit. You can only do one thing at a time. But anyhow, so there are 3 ways that you can integrate Google Docs and slides into your assignments. And the one that I've used for the past 2 years is the Google Drive file upload. Google Cloud Assignment is, to my knowledge, relatively recent and probably what I'm going to start doing this year. And Google Assignments LTI has a lot more capacity, but you might be limited by what your Canvas administrator allows you to do. All of these things, though, assume that you know how to add an assignment, that you have some familiarity with Canvas. So when you go to click Add Assignment, you make the title, you make the description, maybe link some things, pictures, yada, yada. Then it'll ask you how many points do you want it to be, what submission type do you want? So we're going to focus on that, but it also asks due dates, when do you want to be available from and to, who do you want to assign it to, the whole class or certain students or groups. There's all sorts of functionality on assignments, but we're only going to hone in on submission type. And because this is kind of where the Google Suite assignments gets tricky. So submission type is an option. When you click on that, it'll give you those 4 options. No submission. No submission is great. I use no submission for things like no red ink, where I don't, again, to my knowledge, it might be out there. No red ink does not integrate with Canvas. There is no plugin or LTI for it. So I put no submission on no red ink assignments, and then I can still grade it, but the students don't have to submit something. And it still populates their to-do list, which is nice. So no submission is great for assignments that are not within Google or on Canvas. Online is typically the one I think you're going to use most, and certainly what you're going to use for this. On paper, obviously, if you're in person and kids are doing things on paper, you submit that. It's essentially no submission. An external tool will be used for those cloud assignments. You can also use external tool like Nearpod or other third-party apps. So submission type online gives you something that looks like this. And I would always tell teachers to use file upload. If you use website URL, then students would submit the shared link from Google Docs or Google Slides. And what I found is that they would not always have their sharing settings open to me. So I'm trying to grade, I've got 100 things to grade, and I don't have time to request permission to see a student's work from 100 kids. Or if you have, some people have 150 students. or more. So you don't want to get tangled up in sharing permissions on a website URL. However, if you're using something like Padlet or a different software, then website URL might be a thing. But if you're doing Google Docs or Google Slides, you want to use file upload. And so that limits them to, when they see it on their end, there's an option where they can pull over to Google Drive and just upload the file from Google Drive. That's why I call this Google Drive file upload. And there's a whole sort of instruction manual from the instructor guide if you want to see that step-by-step process. To see what it looks like, so this is an example of one of my assignments, pair programming for thesis statements. I presented this to and with students in a physical classroom, so I did not add any additional directions or anything. All I put was the link. And again, this is for a file upload. I wanted them to have a copy, their own personal copy of the slides that we went through together. I didn't want them messing up my master slide. I want them to do the slides. So you can essentially think about anything that you've had before that was a worksheet or something interactive or manipulative within slides. You want to put that link here. And if you haven't been immersed in online learning, you might not know how to make that happen. So when you want a document to automatically make a copy for students and not mess up your original, so you want it to look like this, what you do is you go to the URL or the link at the top and you delete everything up to the backslash. So where it says /edit pound or hashtag, you would delete up to the backslash and enter the word copy. And there are lots of other people that show this online too. If you forget, you can always just Google it. How do I make an auto copy of a doc? And there are people out there with videos and everything. But that's all you do. So if we go back, when I pasted this link, I simply clicked share, got the link, deleted where it said edit, and typed in copy. So now when students click on this, they will see, would you like to make a copy? And they say yes. Oftentimes even I'll have them insert their name in their copy. I'm feeling fancy. And then once they fill it out in Google Slides, so in this case, they filled out their sentences of their opinion and why they're right in their thesis statement, they submit that copy that they have to the file upload. So Google Drive, file upload, pair programming. So that's an example of what it looks like. And this is great because in SpeedGrader, you can just go through all of these slides and sort of pick what you want to grade. You can annotate it. You can do all the cool features of SpeedGrader on their Google Slides. But note, it's actually not a Google Slides, like an active Google Slides. So this is a copy, that same assignment, this copy of Anasia's pair programming thesis statements, which I uploaded it February 18th at 11:46. And that is essentially just a PDF. It's a snapshot. It's frozen. So if Anasia goes back after she's already submitted it and says, oh man, I messed up this sentence, I'm going to fix it, she needs to resubmit so that I can see it, because I'm only seeing a screenshot, a snapshot. This is frozen. This is not actually Google Slides. It's a PDF. So this has its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantages, you get to see where a kid was at a particular moment. The disadvantage is if you're trying to see progress over time, or you're trying to see real live updates, if you're trying to sort of monitor a kid while they're doing work, this is not the greatest. This is really best for final products or snapshots of formative things. And you have to remind students that if you make a change to the Google Doc or the Google Slide, you still need to resubmit so that I can see the changes. And they can resubmit as many times as they want. But keep in mind, this file upload is only a snapshot. It's not a real-time edit. So what I learned recently, I've been doing this for the past 2 years, the file upload, is that there's an easier way. So sorry for wasting your time, maybe. Although I think they can maybe serve slightly different purposes. Now there's something called Google Cloud Assignment. And I think that Paige Dieter explains this very well. So I'm just going to play a little clip of her video, and she's going to show you exactly how to use Google Cloud Assignment. And you'll see in that submission type, it's an external tool, and it's configured a little differently. When I click play, let me know if you can't hear this.
I really want to make sure of is this submission type. So this submission type is probably going to be on no submission for you if you haven't created an assignment yet. So I want to change that to external tool. The external tool that I'm using is Google. From here, I'm going to click on Find. I'm going to find what I'm looking for. I can embed something from Equatio or Google or Kami or Khan Academy. I love using Nearpod. So all of these are options for you. However, since this is a Google slide, it's going to fall under that Google Docs Cloud assignment. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to take me straight to my Google Drive. I've already allowed access, so you may need to allow access. I'm going to find that resource. It is called Classify Triangles, and then I'm going to click Submit. From there, I'll click Select, and it has populated my link right here for that specific resource. Now, just to stay organized, I'm going to load this tool in a new tab, and I'm going to assign that to everyone. If I wanted to assign this as an enrichment assignment or maybe a retake, I would select a small group of students. I'm going to make this due in a week. Click Done, and I will save and publish. Always make sure that your assignments and pages and quizzes are published, because if you don't, your students will let you know. And I have heard that one too many times, but it's an easy fix and it's easy to work out. So now I have my assignment created. It's in the assignment section, and I'm going to load that in a new window. So here it's created on a new window. You've created a cloud assignment external tool submission type from your Google account. Students will receive a copy of this document that they can modify for their assignment submissions. So you want to make sure that each student has their own copy, which is automatically done with the external tool in Canvas. So that is wonderful. You'll be able to go ahead and look at all of their submissions, give them a grade, enter it into Canvas, and then you will be able to download that straight into your gradebook, into your system, if that allows, which is
So yeah, it automatically makes a copy. So I've been taking the long way for however long this has existed. So I think in the future, I will be doing this Google Cloud assignment. And again, that's the file submission type that falls under external tool. So if we go back here, we would click on external tool, and then we would do the Google Cloud assignment. And that actually looks like this, Google Docs Cloud assignment. Now, that's one way, but that way is also still static. It doesn't change. So when a student submits the work, that's it. If they make a change within Google Slides or Google Docs, they have to resubmit if they want you to see the changes. You can't see them working while they do it. So if you want to see edits in real time, you can use something called Google Assignments LTI. And for those of you that were Google Classroom users, you're familiar with Google Assignments. It is the same thing, but they've integrated it with Canvas. And when you look up external tool, if you have it installed as an app from your course navigation, it'll say Google Assignments. when I tried to do this with my school's Canvas, that is not currently populated there because it needs to be installed by the Canvas administrator. You need to have a key for Google Assignments. Whereas Google Docs Cloud Assignment automatically populates, as far as I know, if your Canvas administrator has enabled Google on Canvas for students and teachers.
Right. That question did come up in the chat. So
sure.
Yeah, send flowers and candy to your administrators. Find out what their favorite treats are, what their favorite coffee beverage is, and shower them with that. But because they'll get a lot of requests around this, but that is something that has to be done at the district level. If you're going to go to the Google Assignments and that LTI, all the others though, teachers have the capability of setting that up themselves. So. Two different ways that you can do that you demonstrated, but the Google Assignments piece has to start at the district level.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay.
And
just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that before we.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
And you should always be extra nice to your ITRTs or your ICTs or anybody who's in charge of your technology at school, especially right now. So just because this is about I had narrowed it down to 5 minutes, Andrew Fenstermaker's video on Google Assignments, but because we have about 15 minutes left and I want to explain Google Collaborations, which I know everyone can use, I'm going to go ahead and skip over this. But if you want to view this on your own, slides will be available. The link to the slides will be available at the end, and I think on the YouTube description. So feel free to watch this video, but Andrew explains how Google Assignments works. And the beauty of it is if you configure it a certain way, you can see students making changes while they're working, which is really neat if that's what you aim to do for a particular assignment. For most things though, Google Docs Cloud Assignment is going to be just fine for you. That's what I would use. But again, this video will be here for you later. And just to review, there are those 3 different ways, but I think myself and for everyone else, this Google Cloud Assignment with the external tool is what you're going to want to use. Seems like the easiest path of least resistance. So collaboration. So I still was wondering, how can I see students working in real time? For instance, in my summer course, I had a daily check-in journal and a daily checkout journal. And it was a bit cumbersome and it also looked terrible on the student page to have 14 check-ins and 14 checkout assignments, even though the doc itself, the Google Doc, I had each date laid out in a space for students to write. So it was a daily journal. You might consider this too, just your daily warm-ups or your daily exit tickets. Typically, in the future, I would not recommend grading every single one of them. I would just have that submission once a week or once every 2 weeks or once a month, something like that. But I would still, as a teacher though, since we're online, I would want to see if a student's actually doing it daily. But I don't want them to have to submit it every time, and I don't want to have to make 30 submission buttons for a month. So I want to be able to see that edit in real time just to check on them. Kind of like in the classroom, you'd walk around and see, that they're working or they're not working and have those little conversations. And collaborations would allow you to do that. I think initially it will take a little bit of time to set up, but in the end it will be totally worthwhile. And you can integrate collaborations with assignments. So if you wanted to give a grade for it, you could. But you could arrange it to where you give 1 grade instead of 30 grades for 30 warm-ups in a month. Collaborations would also be great for when I do group projects. I have students sign up for roles and they delineate their timeline and their schedules for meetings and how they're going to do their work together. And so collaboration is great because students can be on a document together. They don't have to go through the process of exchanging emails, and they don't have to go through the process of making sure to add the teacher to the shared doc. Collaborations keeps it all in one place. So here's a little preview of what it looks like. You go down in your Canvas page, there's a spot for collaborations. And just like an assignment, you click Add Collaboration. And you can decide if you want to use a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, or a Google Slide in that option. You can name it whatever you want to name it, give it a description, and then you can choose whether or not you can choose which students you want to have in the collaborative doc or slide or sheet. I already had preset National History Day groups. And so I could just drag, I thought I could drag, you just click them and they go over there. You can click what groups, or maybe it's just one group is on a doc. You have preset groups. Canvas is great because students can sign up for their own groups and make that available to them. As long as you have people enabled, and obviously share with the students how to access that. But once you put the people in the collaboration on Canvas, you can click on it. At this point, I realized I was screencastifying a tab and not my whole screen. But when you click on that, it will take you to a Google Doc, and it will have the students that you selected in the Google Doc, and you will have access to the Google Doc. In fact, I think you own it. Some collaborations advice. So when you do collaborations, obviously it works best for small groups. To pull back to that agile lens, an effective group professionally among adults is anywhere from 3 to 9 people. For young people, it's really closer to 3 or 4 for ideal group size. So I would make those collaborations small groups if possible. And then once you establish the groups, you can always go in and check on that collaboration. Something to note though is that you cannot create a collaboration for more than 50 students. You really shouldn't have groups of 50 students doing any one thing together on a document anyways. So collaborations is a great way to integrate Google Docs, Google Slides, and for students to work on projects and for you to still be able to monitor it in real time. So really cool. And again, this is something that came about in my evolution of learning Canvas. Last year, the collaborations has been there since, I don't know, maybe the beginning, but I just ignored all the stuff I didn't use and I just didn't have time for that. But now that I was exploring, okay, how can I get to see documents edited in real time? I discovered this and, oh, okay, now I'll experiment with it. So we're all probably in different places right now. Maybe this year you're really just focused on modules. I think that's a fantastic place to start. Modules comprise the course. That I would say matters the most. Out of all these things on the side that you could choose, I would set your modules first. And this goes back to sort of backwards design, right? Where you plan with the end in mind. So do your modules reflect that? Do your modules set students up for success if they're doing projects or whatever your assessments are? And make sure those align. Once you get modules down, then maybe explore the other features, making rubrics or collaborations. Tomorrow, my colleague Rebecca is going to discuss assessment. And there's a multitude of things that you can learn about assessment on Canvas. And again, I probably only know a quarter of it. Even though I use it, it's just not where I've spent the most of my time. So decide what you want to prioritize as you plan your course. And keep in mind that Kanban principle of limiting your WIP, your work in progress. Can't learn all these things before school starts. Choose one. And again, if you have to choose one to really focus on and do well, I think modules would be incredibly important, closely followed up probably by assessment, and then check out these other things. So we did it. We got through the whole journey here of workflow and modules, Google Suite assignments. I have, as Rod mentioned earlier, a multitude of resources. These are just a few links from the slides today. Again, if you're interested in more agile Kanban practices, this is a great blog, a starting point. Canvas guides, if you want to go swimming in that deep pool of resources, definitely use Control F, right? Search within that Canvas guide to see what you're looking for. I would make sure that you know how to do the Google Cloud assignment, and those tutorials are linked there. Canvas collaborations. I linked my Twitter community of practice, and this isn't because I want more followers. That's cool. So right now I'm following more people than are following me. But that's really not why I'm showing you this. I'm showing you this because I have found so many free Google Slides and HyperDocs that I've been able to use the next day. I edit it for my purposes, and it saves me a ton of time. I absolutely love Amanda Sandoval. She teaches on the West Coast, and she posts free, just totally editable, awesome resources, particularly in history, which is great for me as a humanities teacher. I also love Mrs. Byers. They're at the same school. If you scroll down here, there is another person recently, Nadine Gilkinson. Yes, they're at the bottom. She has been posting a ton of resources, again, free for math, chemistry, other sciences, history, you name it. Someone out there has made something for it, and it's free. And so graciously connect with them, thank them for their work. And then when you make something, share it out. I've made HyperDocs and things and shared those out on my Twitter as well. And again, there's this sense of real community of just advancing innovation and learning and sharing tips and tricks. So I highly recommend to check out Twitter for that. And one last thing I'll leave you with is to keep in mind that evolution, right? I'm going into my 3rd year using Canvas, and I've grown. And I didn't start out with a page that looked like this. And so what you're seeing online right now, and admittedly even in that Twitter community, you've seen a lot of jazzy, spiffy looking things using Canva and cool icons, and they're fun to make. They really are. If you like design, cool fonts, I'm not sure I would start there because that has a steep learning curve too. Just this summer, this is the first time I've had a homepage with buttons for modules and grades and whatnot. But truthfully, that course right there, it works just the same in modules. Everything that's awesome about that course started with modules, and how I designed that course flow with the end in mind and with limiting my work in progress for students. So I would start there and keep in mind that it's a growing process. And I am by no means an expert, so I hope I didn't say anything wrong today, but this is my experience. And if you know of other ways of doing these things, please let me know. I am certainly interested in growing. Speaking of which, I welcome your feedback. Feel free to email me at aaron.hill@coderva, whether that's positive or just constructive criticism, or if you like something today, let me know. Feel free to share these things with attribution, please. And the slides are there, tinyurl.com/VistiHillSlides. I really appreciate you listening to my kind of giddy craziness about all things Canvas and Google modules.
Right, well, thank you, Aaron. There was a lot of information there. And I'll try to put that in the chat, but we will share it out later. The tiny URL. So yeah, thank you again. I mean, there was a lot of information you covered around how to make things happen in Canvas, and I guess you really did emphasize that, you know, those content goals and those objectives that you have and how you're going to lay that out for students really do come first, and then figuring out the best tools to use to make that happen for your students, while at the same time trying to grow some sense of efficiency on your own part to keep from spending hours upon hours upon hours building this. And I agree, some things coming up in the chat. Aaron, you rock. Absolutely, I do agree. And then just, you know, showing those resources and sharing this resource. I know I encourage you to use Erin's contact information there, connect with her on Twitter to continue the conversation. She's right. As soon as you go there onto her to her page and you start looking around, you'll find others that you might be able to click on links and follow other folks as that community builds there. Visti is in the process of establishing a professional learning network among Virginia educators to do some of those very same things with sharing out those resources and connecting with one another, applauding the work of folks like Aaron and many of our other presenters during this lunch and learn time, and then sharing out some of the things that you've learned from there, as well as many of the iterations of you've taken something and you've switched it up to be from science to social studies, or from middle school students to high school students. So as we're working through connecting with one another, collaborating with one another, and then contributing back to the work that everybody is trying to accomplish here as we prepare for this school year, and then keeping that going throughout the school year, connecting back to that professional learning network. We'll offer some additional sessions and some things advertised out to support teachers as they move forward in building these courses and iterating their process and their practice using this interface to really meet the needs of learners. So again, thank you, Aaron. We're looking forward to hearing more from Rebecca tomorrow. Thank all of you who submitted things in through the chat as far as questions, and all of you who attended. And again, check out that Visti video YouTube channel and the playlist there for all the lunch and learns. Thank you again today, Aaron, and for everyone for joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, and bye for now. Bye for today.
Yes. See you.
Thanks as always to Rod too. This is Karen chiming in. And
thank you, Karen. And I think Mike already had to cut out, but thanks to Mike.
okay, great. If you could stay for a minute, Rod, I just had a quick question. You have time?
Okay. Should we?